branch. Can I request that those who are using numbers in numbers in nicknames, just maybe to write your names in full so that our attendance register can be well captured. First and foremost, I would like to welcome our president, Nazim Hadi, and our national secretary. I'm not sure whether the president-elect has joined, but in absentia, if he'll still join us, he is also welcome to this annual general meeting or branch executive meeting. I think we will decide in the end as to what do we call this, but the invitation that went out, it was for us to have a special general meeting. Without much ado, may I request maybe Apelele just to confirm whether we correct. Apelele?
Yes, Martin.
Is it a yes that we correct?
Yes.
Yes, according to our numbers, we are currently at 82, and according to the attendees at the moment, we are 17, but we need to also subtract the president and national secretary, but then it will be around 14, 15 there. Thank you so much. Colleagues, once again, welcome. I'm not sure whether you have got the agenda for today, as I would like us to move to the next agenda point, which is confirmation of the agenda. Apelele, do you have a copy to share with us?
Okay, let me open my emails. I shared it with everyone, but I can share it now. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Apelele. We are done with number 1, 2, and 3, and we are at item number 4. Colleagues, can we go through the agenda? And then can I also, in the meantime, request somebody to move for the adoption of the agenda and a seconder? On the agenda, we've got the following items after confirmation. It's attendance and apologies, which we need to do. It's one of the procedural items. Personalia, I'll do the purpose of the meeting. And I'll also introduce our EXCO member present here. In item number 9, it's restructuring that will cover all those items listed below, 9.1 to 9.5. And then we will also hear about the status of the proposed special general meeting, which is a national one now. And then we will have closing remarks. Is there any additions members would like to put on this agenda before we continue or before we adopt it? You can just unmute and start to talk. Colleagues, is the agenda fine? Is the agenda that was circulated accepted? Colleagues, you are silent.
I think
Yes,
it's
Mr. Martin,
fine.
that was the
Yeah.
agenda I found online, so accepted.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank
I suppose it's Okuli that moves for the adoption of the agenda, and I heard Enes also. I suppose is supporting the motion
Yes,
to adopt.
Yes,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I support it.
Okay, thank you so much. Any apologies that we have received? I'm not sure the secretary is in this meeting. If you are in the meeting, can you just update us on any apologies? Any apologies? In the absence of any apologies, I need to make this remark on the attendance. I see quite a number of the Northwest University staff are not attending this meeting. And to those who are available here today, just make them aware what the implications are going to be of them not attending this meeting. I'm sitting as a chairperson, and I'm also sitting in the Library Management Committee. And we've got guidelines regarding LIASA membership. And then if they are proudly like this organization, they would attend events that are organized because it's expected of them, since the employer is also paying for them. So currently we do not have a clause that says you need to participate before the employer pays for you. But since we are reviewing this document, I would suggest that that clause be inserted there, and some of us will be really severely impacted by this, because only this year we struggled to get the employer to pay for us because of other things that happened. So that's why, Mr. President and Secretary, our registrations for this year, particularly the Northwest University staff, was delayed as a result of the chief director querying a lot of things. So I will take the list, I will draw the list, and I will look critically on the list who's available and who's not. And if I find out it's 50%, then I had to bring it under the attention of senior management as a way of helping us, because we cannot want to have the employer spending a lot of money. In the end, people are not doing what they are supposed to do. Thank you for so much for that. Colleagues, any personalia? Any special thing that we can celebrate together before we continue with other businesses? No one got married. No one is having a baby. Ernest?
Nothing.
Nothing. I only thought of you. Colleagues, I suppose your silence means no, we can continue. Let me move on to item number 7, purpose of the meeting. Colleagues, you would recall that a number of proposals and suggestions have been brought forward regarding particularly restructuring. So the meeting today would focus on us looking back at the progress that is made around restructuring. We know that this year is a year of elections. We are going to reflect a little bit as to see whether elections are going to continue or not. And the other important part that I want us to have clarity on is the board composition. I think we owe to the members to know exactly where the process is. I am well aware that some information has already been shared via the office of the president, Mr. Nazim Hadi. So this today, I've invited them as well, you know, as a result of the last Rep Council resolution that some of the points the national office would like to, you know, bring forth by themselves to our members, so that we all know where we stand and where we are going to, and then what's going to happen forward. So I recently also, as a Rep Council member, received another communication from the president, and I think the president will be able to touch on this. So colleagues, before I continue with the rest, I would like to move over to item number 8 and introduce our ExCo members. Here present, we've got our President Nazim Hadi. President, in 1 or 2 minutes, may you please pass your greetings.
Good morning, everybody. As Martin has said, I'm the president. I am really glad to be here. I know I don't communicate as much as I would like to, but I do want to also congratulate Martin as well as the Northwest for taking this initiative, for having this meeting. It's actually the first of, I think, the branches who've actually taken you know, things by the scruff of the neck and have called a meeting to actually talk about this really important matter. So well done to the Northwest. And yes, I'm looking forward to engaging with all of you around the issues that is on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. National Secretary Memo Khadi, may you please also just pass your greetings.
Good morning, colleagues, Northwest Branch and Tatenokwana. Thank you for the opportunity. As my president has just said, we are, you know, we acknowledge your invitation and the fact that indeed you are coming out there as the first branch to invite us. So we really appreciate, and I seem to be the Northwest branch member these days. I've just been talking to you last week. So I will be still going to talk to you this week. So I'm here in the meeting today. So I'm honored to be part of the Northwest branch. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Secretary. I'm not sure whether Ntate Chali Mulepo, our president-elect, has joined the meeting. If so, may you also please greet the Northwest branch members.
I don't see him in the meeting yet, Martin. So
yeah, he doesn't seem to have joined yet.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President and Secretary, and you are welcome. It is my honor and privilege to introduce you to our branch, and we are humbled by your presence here this morning. Given the fact that we've got so many things around our own spaces, but you saw it necessary to join us. Thank you so much. And Mr. President, I would also like to invite you to take us through these items of restructuring where we are. I don't foresee that we are going to have a very long meeting. Unless members have got clarity-seeking questions, you are welcome to do so. But the meeting here is really to bring you on board as to what is happening, so that as we are also preparing for the conference and maybe the annual general meeting, as a branch, we need to have a voice that we can also present at that general meeting. So, Mr. President, may I invite you to take us through all the items on item number 9.
Thank you very much, Martin. I don't really have a presentation for people, but I'm going to do my best to try and get through everything, so that I think we all kind of comfortable with where we are, familiar with where we are, and I do want to encourage you to ask questions, to challenge if needs be. I mean, I look at somebody like Ernest, who is, I consider, almost an elder of LIASA. He's come a long way with the association, has a lot of experience about where we come from. And so I do want you all to engage around these issues. And as I said, to question, to challenge, to put your case forward as well. This is not my LIASA. It's not the secretary's LIASA or the chair's. It's everybody's. And I think that's what we're all striving to do. So in terms of restructuring and where we find ourselves in terms of progress, let me start off by saying that I think restructuring has taken us a long time. It feels like it's been a conversation that's been happening forever. I do, though, want to say that having engaged with people from other organizations at last year's IFLA, for example, organizations that have been around much longer than us and have also engaged in terms of restructuring, we are not actually doing too bad. I think for most organizations, it seems to be taking kind of like a 6-year period to really get to a place where you can see that there's possibly a light at the end of the tunnel. My sense also from last year's AGM at conference was also people were kind of in a space where we need this to come to a point where we can put this behind us, and we can actually move forward and create the next version of the association. I'm not sure if I read the room wrong, but that's kind of the sense that I was getting, that people were almost tired of actually hearing about restructuring and what needs to happen and where we are. So with all of that in mind, what EXCO has done, and more specifically what myself and the president-elect has done, is to really look at where do we go next? What do we have to do next to actually bring this to a point where we can say, we've done this, and here it is, for better or for worse, and now let's look forward to actually making this happen. So as you would be aware, when restructuring itself started with a conversation in 2016, had a motion taken to conference in 2018, was agreed to in terms of the concept of restructuring. And in 2019, very famously, the immediate past president presented the structure initially to the Rep Council, and eventually at the AGM, or at least at the conference, presented that view of what the structure would be. The concept of what was presented there has not really changed much. So the concept that we have put forward and that we have continued exploring in terms of the progress is that, and now I'm going to touch partly on 9.4, is that if we look at LIASA over the last 25 years, at that point it wasn't 25 years yet, but we were almost there. But over the kind of 20-year period, we did not necessarily see progress in terms of having branches, having the structure that we have. If we look at the structure that we're still sitting with, it's very much a structure that was there from day one. It served a specific purpose, and I think it's still, if we look at it, it really mirrored what was happening in our country at the time. And for that reason, I think it was the best structure that we could put forward in order to create this association that was LIASA, bring it into being, and look at carrying it forward. But I think one of the real issues that have always bugged us in terms of our structure is that we are very much a voluntary association. People volunteer their time, people volunteer their efforts, and unfortunately, we all have day jobs. We all have a situation where LIASA is not your paid job. You get paid by your employer to do a specific amount of work, and very often LIASA takes a backseat. Whether you are the president, whether you are the branch chair, the interest group chair, LIASA basically took second place in a lot of cases. So with all of this in mind, I think we have seen stagnation across the branches. In the last election, if I can remind you all, we had a number of branches and interest groups where there were not enough people nominated. Branches and interest groups went into abeyance. Looking back at that decision that we made, it might not necessarily have been the best decision, but that's where we found ourselves in this journey of restructuring. So once we took all of that into consideration, we tried to look at where does the strength really lie? And a lot of the strength really was starting to come to the fore in terms of where you find yourself working in a particular sector. So whether you were a public librarian, school librarian, an academic librarian, etc., that seems to really be where the strength was lying. And if we look at the last 2 years, etc., a lot of the events that have actually taken place have very much been driven by interest groups. ICBIS is probably one of the strongest groups that we currently have at the moment. And yes, even strong branches, I think, fell by the wayside. So very famously, the branch that I belong to, the Western Cape, has been in abeyance for 2 years. Very recently, they started getting things together to try and bring some interim people on board to get things going, get interest going, etc. But the Western Cape, which was considered to be one of the strongest branches, despite all of that, still they ended up in a situation where they ended up in abeyance simply because there wasn't many people put forward in terms of nominating people. And I think that's the biggest problem we're sitting with, is getting people to be there and drive the association forward. I think there's still a lot of enthusiasm. I'm encouraged by the fact that there's a lot of young people who are asking questions, challenging where LIASA is, where it is going, and asking for young voices to be recognized. And that gives me hope that there is a future for the association. So with all of that in mind, the proposal was then that we become a sector-based organization, that we would do away with branches, and that some of the functions that would have existed in an EXCO be absorbed into the LIASA National Office. The current Rep Council and the current EXCO was also proposed that be replaced by a board. And much of our discussion over the last 2 years, maybe a little bit more, has been around board composition. Boards, by its nature in South Africa, people tend to be suspicious about boards. If we look at companies in South Africa, if we look at parastatals, etc., that all have boards, I think we are naturally suspicious when we think about boards. But again, looking at what the trend is across the world, most, if not all, major library associations are run by a board. ALIA in Australia has a board in place. The American Library Association has a form of board in place as well, even though they do have a council as well. But even they are in the process of looking at restructuring. SILIP, which is in the UK, has a board. IFLA itself, in terms of the governing body, has a board. There are not many boards in Africa. There's maybe 1 or 2 countries that actually have a board. But I think we are on the right track in terms of looking at where do we need to go in terms of taking the association forward. So that was the broad composition of what we wanted to do in terms of restructuring. So doing away with branches, having sectors, having a board in place to basically run the association, and start absorbing certain things into the office. Things like marketing, things like finance, so the treasurer function, as well as secretarial duties. One of the big questions I think we've always been asked is, how is this going to be funded? It's one of the questions where I don't really have an answer for you even today. But again, bearing all of that in mind, we have looked at where do we take this next, because we can't just overnight create an association that is completely different, completely financially viable in a different way, and put all of this in place. So if we look at all of these things, what has happened since the last AGM at conference in 2022, we have engaged an attorney to look at the constitution of the association. Part of the attorney's duties is to look at what are we proposing in terms of restructuring, what are we proposing in terms of the structure to be, then looking at the constitution and then advising us in terms of what needs to change in order to make that constitution compliant with where we want it to go. Remember, all of this is dependent on an AGM or a special general meeting approving what we are asking for. So if we look at what has been approved to date, we would agree, and it is recorded as such, that what has been agreed to is the principle of restructuring. What has been agreed to at an AGM is the broad principles of what this new structure would look like. So the sectors, the board, those are the principles that have been agreed to. The next stage is to look at taking to AGM or a special general meeting, because it's only the members who can do this. Remember, AGM, regardless of how we restructure, will continue to be the highest decision-making body. That will never change, regardless of how we restructure. Even if we decide that after all of this, this is not possible for us to take to fruition, whatever we come up with next, it will still be AGM and members that remains the highest decision-making body. So we have had meetings with the attorneys. It maybe hasn't gone as fast as we would like it to, but we have had meetings with the attorneys. Myself and the president-elect, either together or one of us, have engaged with them. We have received the first draft of what the constitution would look like. We have had a discussion with the attorneys about that first draft. We have sent it back to them We have been asked to deliver 1 or 2 outstanding items on that constitution in terms of the new structure. And the attorneys are busy and are in the process of creating the next draft. Will this draft be available very soon? I would like to say yes, but I am not entirely sure that it will be in time for the kind of timeline that we originally drew in terms of the recent Rep Council that we had, that Martin was referring to. In terms of what we have proposed to Rep Council and what Rep Council has agreed to, and in turn what we have indicated to the attorneys, the following is what we have proposed in terms of board composition. There would still be a president, there'd be a president-elect, and the rest of the board is made up as follows. There are 5 sectors that we have proposed in terms of the composition of the board. So public and community libraries, school libraries, academic libraries or higher education, special libraries, and then LIS education. So those are 5 sectors that we have proposed. So these 5 sectors would be represented on the board. So together with the president and president-elect, that makes 7 people. All of those positions would be positions that we would have an election process for. So in terms of where we find ourselves, we would look at having an election, and what needs to change in terms of how people join or when they join and or renew is, in the past, you would say, I belong to the Northwest branch. One of the privileges that you would then have is you would have the option to choose 2 interest groups. And those interest groups would be, one would be your primary and one would be your secondary interest groups. What will happen in what is to come is that instead of choosing a branch, you would say, I belong to sector X. So if it is a public library, you would choose the public and community library sector. If you work at the Northwest University, you would choose the higher education sector. That requires a whole different way of looking at membership and what happens when people join. So when it comes to elections, it will be about who is representing, who do you want to put forward that actually works in that sector. So when we look at closing the voters roll, the voters roll would comprise of members, and those members would be represented in terms of the sector in which they actually work and that they elected when they joined and or renewed LIASA. And so when you make a nomination, when you elect people, it would be around your sector that you are working in. So the entire board would be made up of 13 people. And those, so right now we've got 7 people. The LIASA office manager would make an 8th person. And the remaining 5 people on the board are people that we would bring on board that would have skills that we are looking for in terms of the association that would not be represented in the people that are on the board. So an example would be that we would require marketing skills, for example. So we would actually go out and actually look for people that actually have those skills, and they would be nominated to be on the board. One of the structures that needs to be part of the board, and this is in any board structure, and you can go and have a look at it, would be a nominations committee. There would be names put forward to that nominations committee. They would have a look at it. They would look at the skills of the person that have been put forward. And based on the set of skills that we are looking for, those 5 positions would be filled by 5 people that would be nominated to be part of it. So it won't be an election process, but it would be a nomination process that is put forward to the nominations committee. And after they have deliberated, those additional 5 people would come onto the board. And that would be the board composition. It needs to be an uneven number, because when the board votes on matters of the association, there needs to be a deciding vote. Are there any, I've said quite a lot of things, so are there any questions that anybody has at this point? Any comments that you have? I'm just going to pause for a bit. You can either raise your hand or just say your name. Or is it all too much?
Mr. President, I would like to ask.
Yeah.
The term of office
Go
of
ahead,
the
it's
president.
breaking.
The office of the president is going to be the same 2 years, or it will change.
Sorry, can you maybe just repeat it? It broke up a little bit. If I understand
said the
correctly,
term of
you're
office
asking,
of the president.
oh, yeah. So you want to know about the term of office?
Is it going to? Yeah, yes, please.
Okay. So I think that is still a point that we've got to decide upon in its finality. But for now, it will either remain as is. So we're looking at a 2-year period. If it was to be longer than that, it wouldn't extend beyond 3 years. And one of the things that we are looking at is, in terms of an interim structure, it might be a little bit longer. One of the things that we are looking at changing in terms of the fact that it is a board coming onto the structure in terms of running the association, is that unlike the current structure, people who serve a term on the board, whether it is the president or whether it is one of the people running the sectors, they would have the option to have a second term, which is a slight change from what we have been having of late, where you've got a chair and a chair-elect. So if we take all of those away, and in order to bridge that kind of gap, we are saying that a person is elected onto the board, and that person would have the right to have a second term as well. The president-elect is slightly different, and I think that will continue the way it currently runs, because you become the president-elect, you have your period that you serve in that capacity, and your next term is as the president. But as I said, that's not entirely written in stone yet, but that's kind of what we're looking at in terms of the period of office. Any other comments or questions? if there isn't anything else, I want to move on.
A question, Mr. Hadi. Hello?
Yes, go ahead. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can hear you. It's
Oh,
breaking
okay.
up a little bit, but I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm also having
I'm
problem.
speaking.
You are speaking to Northwest University. Thank you. I just
Okay.
need clarity on what will be happening at branch level. We are going to have a
Okay.
board which will be running the association, and we are also going to have sectors, 5 sectors.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can just take it from there, representing the various sectors in the association.
Okay. So on ground level, and I know it's a huge leap for people to make. I think we've always been used to the fact that there are branches, and there are interest groups, and interest groups functioned at a national level, sometimes at a branch level as well. But we've also seen that a lot of that has kind of fallen away as we have moved on over time. So a lot of interest groups, for example, that used to be healthy and thriving in terms of being at a branch level has also kind of fallen by the wayside. So the idea would be that whoever is elected into the positions of representing the sectors, their work is also there to look at engaging people on the ground level. So instead of there being a formal structure, and I think what we're looking at is trying to get away from we've boxed people in terms of their branch orders, for example. So let's take, I'm not that familiar with the Northwest in terms of the terrain, for example, but if I think about what little I do know, so if you're in Rustenburg, for example, you kind of possibly in the center of things, where things happen, where branch meetings happen, etc. But if you outside of Rustenburg, and we hear this a lot from people across branches, is the distances that people have to travel to get to a meeting is really vast. Yes, life has been made easier because we can do things online nowadays, and I think that has made things a little bit better. But for a lot of people, it's I think they really thrive when they get together in person still and make things happen. So a lot of people would say, in order for me to attend a meeting, I've got to drive 2 hours to get to a meeting. I don't think that is worth it for me. So what we're trying to get away from, even in terms of sectors, is that you're not restricted to, in the Northwest, everybody must gather at the same place. That if there is a meeting that takes place, it is about what is the closest in terms of geography for you. So even if you're in the Northwest, if the nearest set of public libraries, for example, is in another province, because that's actually closer for you than, for example, going to Rustenburg, then that's how you would actually gather and get together and actually arrange meetings and events, etc. What these people nominated to be on the board as well is they will continue to be that sense of volunteerism, is to also get people within the sectors to actually organize events, to get things going on the ground level. One of the things that I think really needs to happen from here on out when restructuring is in place is that there needs to be a lot more effect given to organizing things at a central level and then being able to roll it out across the country. And so very often what would happen is, even if something is organized, if there isn't a structure, within a particular place, it means there's very little that actually happens. And one of the benefits that we see of doing it this way is that, again, if there's something that gets rolled out across the country, it's not restricted to where you are within a particular province. It is about what is the closest people to you, and how do they get together to actually make this happen and roll out whatever event or training or program it is that we have instituted. Again, I'm not sure that I'm giving you the answer that you really want to hear. And I think until all of this happens, it's really difficult to say, you know, it's going to work perfectly from day one. I think we need to let it happen. We need to see how it works. And we need to continuously make changes to it if we see, for example, that it isn't working. I think a lot of what has happened in terms of the previous structure is that too often we would see things that have gone wrong, isn't quite working, but we just continue. The idea that we would like to see moving forward is that we would be much more responsive in terms of identifying the fact that something is not quite happening the way it's supposed to, and being able to then respond to that and say, this is what we're putting in place in terms of taking the process forward. Again, I don't think I'm adequately answering your question, but at right now, we need to see how this unfolds and whether it works the way we've drafted it in theory.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? I just need to say, I forgot to say that at the beginning. I have load shedding at 12, so there might be a slight drop. So if you see me disappear, it's probably when load shedding kicks in, but I will still be available. Okay. Any other comments or questions, or can I move on? If you do want to, you can also drop a question into the chat box, and I'll get it there and I'll respond to that as well. So if I can just jump to 9.4 again. So if we're talking about the future of branches and interest groups, the immediate future of branches and interest groups will not disappear completely. There has to be an interim structure. So, and I'll talk about the interim structure, what we are wanting to propose moving forward. So initially there'll be something that is a combination of where we're wanting to go and where we currently find ourselves. So ultimately though, it is the idea that there won't be branches, there won't be interest groups. There'll be interest groups, but they won't be called that. It will be about the sector that you are in, rather than an interest group. It is also about encouraging people to build up communities of practice in terms of their sectors, also in terms of other skills that isn't covered by a sector. So one of the things that we're having to grapple with, that we've been asked very feverishly to not lose sight of, is groups like ICBIS. So cataloging in itself is not a sector, but there certainly is a huge place for catalogers to actually get together. And as I said, ICBIS is probably one of the most thriving interest groups at the moment. It's not an energy and enthusiasm that we want to lose. So the idea being that those become really kind of communities of practice, where people get together, where they are, where they actually talk about these issues in terms of the profession. and getting like-minded people to actually join them. And in that same way, also looking at the sectors and how they would actually get together, and how things would be organized. So all of this brings us to 9.3 and 2023 elections. As I said at the beginning, our engagements with the attorneys has maybe not moved as fast as we would like it to. Initially, our plan was to have a stakeholder engagement that would encompass past presidents, our strategic partners, our sponsors, people that we thought really has an influence in terms of the profession and sector, and actually put some of this in front of them and say, you know, what are your thoughts around it? And the idea was that we would have that kind of engagement in initially in June, and that we were aiming to have a special general meeting in August. In order to have the special general meeting, we had wanted to have the draft of the constitution, and we were going ready, because you've got to give it 2 months notice to have a special general meeting. As you can see up to now, there hasn't been much communication around that, and that's simply because our engagements with the attorneys have not progressed to that point yet. What does that mean for 2023 elections? So we still want to have this stakeholder engagement. We are aiming for early August to have the stakeholder engagement. We are still considering having a special general meeting, but this might only materialize in September, which is actually really close to the AGM, which is scheduled for October. What do we want to do at that meeting? We're wanting to propose that there be a transitional structure, that transitional structure is made up of the chair-elects. So Martin's term, for example, ends at this forthcoming AGM. The chair-elect would then step into the role of the chair. So in the case of the Northwest, that would be Tapiso. And the idea is that whoever is chair-elect steps into that position where they are chair-elects, because not every branch has a chair-elect. So, for example, if we look at branches, in the Mpumalanga, we don't necessarily have that. In terms of interest groups, there are much more interest groups where we don't necessarily have that scenario. So already what we are proposing in terms of transition and an interim structure is that it would be a smaller group than what we currently have. So currently we have an EXCO which consists of 7 people. We have a rep council that consists of, together with the EXCO, consists of about 32 people. So if we're only looking at the chair-elects stepping into the transitional structure, then it does cut down on the number of people. Because remember, the rep council is made up of a chair and a chair-elect. What we're therefore proposing is that there wouldn't necessarily be elections for 2023, that the chair-elects would automatically assume their position, that they would occupy that position, and furthermore, that the current EXCO would be allowed to continue with the work that has been done up to now. But that EXCO would not exceed beyond 6 months. In that 6-month period, so the day when AGM happens, which is the 12th of October, the interim structure, including the current EXCO, their only purpose at that point is to prepare the association for the structure and elections to come. Because the next set of elections needs to be the election of the board. What also needs to happen in that period of time is that the way people are listed on our database in terms of the membership needs to transition as well. So it needs to transition from I'm a member of the Northwest branch to I am a member of the public library sector. That's a whole changeover that needs to happen. Once we have that in place, we would then know how many people are actually in that particular sector who are members of the association. And the interim structure would then work and look at elections happening within 6 months' time, preparing the association for that election. And in essence, once that job is done within the 6 months, the current EXCO would then step out of their roles. The current president-elect would then take over as the president, and there would then be an election for president-elect, the 5 sector chairs. There'd be an interim nominating committee. They would look at the other 5 positions and who we wanted to nominate to be in those positions, and in essence, put the board in place at that point in time. So that's covering 9.3 and 9.5. So if we are to call a special general meeting, we are having an EXCO meeting on Thursday, where this matter would be discussed. We're really looking at a special general meeting towards the end of September. But one of the things, as I said, we still wish to do is to have this stakeholder meeting. And at the stakeholder meeting is to also sound people out and be able to say, this is what we're proposing. What are your thoughts around this, for example? Do you think that this can work? Is there anything that we need to add to this discussion and this conversation that we're having, as well as the structure and this plan? And then taking all of those things on board as well, taking it to an AGM, getting hopefully approval of what we're putting on the table. And in essence, after this forthcoming AGM and special general meeting, be able to say, here is the new version of what and who LIASA is. And from here on out, this is how the association will be functioning. I'm going to pause there again. So in terms of the agenda, I've basically now covered everything that was under point 9. So again, I'm going to open it up.
Mr. Nokwana? Mr. Nokwana?
I think he's been kicked out by Zoom. Maybe it's the
By
load
the
shedding.
load shedding, as he said,
Yes, yes.
yes. But I'm checking on, oh, he's also off, the chairperson.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Let's hope they will be connecting colleagues. As the president indicated, he is still trying to connect back because of the load shedding. And hopefully few minutes, they will both be back. In the meantime, perhaps, where is the chair-elect? Oh, Mr. Nokwani is trying to connect back. So I was saying in the meantime, people can also put their comments and questions on the chat. Mr. Nokwani, you were both with the president off. So yeah, I see you are connected now.
Yes, thank you, Secretary. Yes, I'm back now.
Yeah, as I'm saying, the president is trying to reconnect.
Yes,
He
yes.
sent me the message as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you so
Mhm.
much.
Okay.
Apologies, I'm back.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah, just also to step in as the president is trying to continue. Mr. Nokwani, that the president-elect has requested that I tender his apology. He had unfortunately just received the invitation for the visa today. So he was actually driving from there when I was checking with him. So he said, I must really sincerely apologize on his behalf. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary. Accepted.
So, any questions, any comments? Martin, I'm not sure if there are no questions or any comments. But I just want to say that as I indicated earlier, yes, this is a structure that has been proposed. The broad concepts of the structure was agreed to. This particular EXCO and Red Council had been tasked to actually take the process forward. And this is where we find ourselves. It is only through engaging with all of you around it that we will either sell the idea to you. And I know it's very difficult to decide whether you think it's something that could work or not. I think it is something that we need to give it a chance to come to fruition. And we then need to see, is this working? But I want to give you the assurance, and it's a pity that the president-elect couldn't be with us. When the president-elect and I started on this journey around restructuring, he has, and the secretary can bear me out, he hasn't always been supportive of, I think, the really broad or the finer concepts of where we are with restructuring. But in the last while, and Martin can maybe attest to this as well from the last Rep Council, we certainly have all come on board in accepting that this is where we find ourselves. This is what we want him to do. We're not by any means saying that it is the perfect structure, and that it is going to work from day one. But I would like to ask people to give it an opportunity to work. But I also want to say to people that, again, membership will always remain the highest decision-making body. And it is membership's right and duty to call into question or to ask awkward and difficult questions of the people who are in charge of the association as to what is happening or what is not happening. In this transition and into this new structure that we are going, I think it can only be as successful as it can be based on how people engage with it and how people actually steer the ship together with the board, the transitional structure, the interim committee, etc. But I think like we did way back when LIASA first came into being, it required a lot of people to come together, to compromise, to talk, discuss, and get to the best structure that they could put forward at the time. And I think that's where we kind of find ourselves again this time around. And I would like to invite all of you to want to be active, to be participative, to put your concerns and your questions forward. I know for a fact that the president-elect is a great believer in communicating with people, being out there, hearing what people actually have to say and taking those things on board. And my invitation to all of you is to take that to heart and let us know what you think. As I said, it's a lot to take in today. What I will aim to do after the meeting is done is to send Martin something that he can maybe share with all of you that's a bit more representative of what I actually talked about today, that's a bit more visual, so that you can maybe engage with it a little bit further. And even if you don't have any questions today, and you have questions after the fact, to channel them via Martin or via Mohadi as the secretary, and bring it to myself and the president-elect and EXCO's attention. Tell us what your concerns are. Tell us what your thoughts are around what we're putting on the table. And let us hear from you. I want to end off and say, it is not my or the president-elect's LIASA. It is not Martin's, it is not Mohadi's, it is everybody's. And it can only work as well or as badly as we all make it. But it does require all of us to be part of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, for this wonderful detailed presentation. You really exceeded my expectations in this regard. I'm not sure whether before we continue, does the National Secretary Mohadi have anything to add? I would like to invite you if so.
Thank you, Chairperson. Not really. My president have said mouthful, and I can just say as a proud LIASA member, as members of this association, surely nobody will take it forth except you. So each one of us as a proud LIASA member, we are responsible. Indeed, the president called upon you to submit any comments, any clarification seeking questions, any suggestions that that can take us forth, because we are in this restructuring together. Otherwise, if we are just pointing fingers and say they will do it and you are counting yourself outside, then we may not be able to do it alone. And as the president said, it isn't the EXCO or neither his association, it is all of us. And for us to make it, to be proud of this association, we have to step in and contribute accordingly. There's nothing that says when you contribute that it will be wrong or whatever. But until you bring your thoughts, until you bring your ideas on the table, we won't know, and we may not even entertain it, or we may not even take it that far that you would want. So it's only up to you as proud LIASA members. We are calling upon you to participate, to contribute, and to make a meaningful association that we will all be proud of. I think that's all I can say. Thank you, Tatenokwan. And thank you, my president. You have outlined all the details I think that they would need to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Memo Khadi. Indeed, President has really explained this whole process. As I earlier said, he exceeded the expectations. Colleagues, the president touched on all those. Don't think that he skipped number 10. I think if you were listening, he also spoke about the special general meeting. And I just want to emphasize that the aim for this meeting was that you are brought up to par or up to speed as to what is happening, so that when we are going to start and engage at a later stage, it is either the special general meeting or the AGM, then we know what we're talking about. And I'm also happy that the president is committed to send me some communication. And of course, I know that that presentation that you did at the Rep Council, where it indicates now the board, and I think members would like to see that visually. So that is really going to assist us going forward. In the meantime, I just want to check whether there are any questions or any comments before I ask our PRO, Ntate Ugo Ukoli, to do the vote of thanks, and maybe also the closing remarks. Any clarity seeking questions? Any comments?
Martin?
Nazi?
Yeah, so
Yes.
nothing to do with restructuring, but I thought it's an opportunity. Let me just say it to everybody as well. Just two things that I want everybody to consider and think about. Don't forget, there is communication going out all the time about Conference 2023. I know a lot of people want to know about grants, for example. So I just want to say that unfortunately, you all know how it goes. The grants come out fairly late. We have no control over it. We are getting funding from the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture. We can only but submit the application. It's only once it is signed off that we can actually make the announcement around grants available. But I want to assure everybody that there will be grants available. as there always is. And I do want people to take the opportunity to apply for them. Again, conference is hybrid, so whether you are going to want to attend online or in person, there will be grants for both possibilities. That's the one thing. The second thing that I do want to encourage everyone to do as well, please don't forget that the awards, call for award nominations are out. There's the Sally Trust Award. There is the Emerging Librarian of the Year Award, the Librarian of the Year, as well as the Influential Library Leader of the Year Award. And I do want to encourage people to apply for those. Our sponsors are really looking forward to having a healthy dose of applications so that you can make our job really tough around who we think are worthy of these awards. So I just want to encourage people to apply for those. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well noted. Any other comments, colleagues? In the absence of those, may I ask Dr. Ugo to do the vote of thanks and closing remarks? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martin. And I just want to use this opportunity to say thank you to Mr. President for availing yourself. I mean, as you said, we were basically the first branch who called you in for this, and despite your busy schedule, you answered us, which is something very, very good. And Memo Khadi also, I thank you very much for availing yourself. Yes, last week we had quite an engaging session with you, and basically you are an adopted member of the Northwest branch. So we will take that to heart. And for the national office, thank you for the slot and the time you've given us for this. And then as we can see, this really, to me, I believe this is growth. This is a new phase of, will I say, new ways of doing things, and basically it's growth. Every organization gets to get to an extent whereby they need to expand their wings and bring in new ideas, ways of doing things, like they normally do in Parliament, whereby they bring out ideas, they share it. This is the way we want things to be done. You can maybe put up a draft and people get to put up their comments and, get to suggest and all that. And with this way also, it's same thing whereby you come into branches and get to speak to every members. I know not everybody's here, but at least at some point, I think maybe if there's a draft that we could also maybe put the others who are not here could actually, bring in their inputs and all that. So it's something that it's very, very, very interesting to get to see in an organization. And I'm very honored to be I'm very honored to be in the midst of what's happening, and I can't wait to see this growth as it expands more and more. And I just want to thank everyone. Despite your schedules, you also get to stay on with us. So from my side, I would say thank you very much for the attendees, and Mr. President and Madam Secretary and National Office, and Mr. Martin also. Thank you for being there, guiding us through the years. I mean, it's been hectic, it's been tough, but you have stand strong with us, and I just want to say thank you for that. And I believe this is the end of it. If there's any comment anybody can put through before we end the meeting, you can go ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you. And that's how we end our meeting today. Oh, there's something on the chat coming through. I'm not sure. Thank you so much, Secretary. And with all that said, thank you. We will meet again.